Have you ever been in a work setting where you felt out of control, demotivated by strict management, and wondered what type of person could possibly survive in this job? And while you're having trouble even making it through the day, your coworker sitting at the desk next to you seems to be doing completely fine? While you may be finding it more difficult to feel a sense of ownership and responsibility for your job because of the strict culture, someone who is maybe a more goal-oriented and diligent may have an easier time navigating their role in their organization. This scenario not only highlights the relationship between an organization's hierarchical structure and an employee's psychological ownership, but how certain personality traits such as conscientiousness can affect this relationship. What we already know is that high hierarchical structure, essentially when there are a lot of levels of management, creates an environment for employees where it's more difficult to feel a sense of psychological ownership towards their work. The lack of autonomy they experience causes them to feel restricted and is a major source of demotivation. However, we notice that a lot of individuals do actually excel in these environments, or at least find a way to perform successfully despite the difficult circumstances. This leads us to our research question. Is the relationship between hierarchical culture and psychological ownership moderated by an individual's level of conscientiousness?
Even though the main relationship between the two main variables has been studied, there still remains a gap in the current available research on our specific moderator and therefore the mediation effect of conscientiousness. This leads to the following moderation model. Research on the main relationship has highlighted the tendency of a rigid structure to negatively affect the empowerment of employees, as they feel as though they lack sufficient autonomy to control decisions if you're restricted by the arrangement of the organization. This leads to the first hypothesis. Hierarchical culture is negatively associated with psychological ownership. Studies on the effect of the moderator concluded that the relationship between the levels of hierarchical culture and psychological ownership can be influenced by the degrees of conscientiousness of employees and leaders. As, regardless of the existing degrees of hierarchical culture within the firm, when employees exhibit conscientious behaviors, they tend to experience increased psychological ownership over their jobs. This leads to the second hypothesis. Conscientiousness buffers the relationship between hierarchical culture and psychological ownership.
As stated, past research has suggested that there is a main effect of hierarchical culture and psychological ownership, as well as a main effect of conscientiousness on psychological ownership. Our research aims to bring these two variables together and analyze the potential of an interaction effect between them, and more specifically, how exactly they interact, and thereby filling the research gap presented earlier. Through this research, firms will also gain a better understanding of how the conscientiousness levels of employees could affect their psychological ownership over their work. Therefore, based on the firm's level of hierarchical culture, they're able to hire employees with a suitable level of conscientiousness, or potentially be more diligent about their applicants' level of conscientiousness depending on their hierarchical culture. In the long run, matching employees in this manner could largely reduce a firm's turnover rate and thus reduce costs resulting from hiring new employees.
Created using Powtoon.